On behalf of my team, I want to welcome you to our Urbanism Next virtual forum presentation entitled Automation and Climate Change on the Bayou. I'm Tyson with Build Baton Rouge, and in a few moments, I'm going to introduce my teammates here today that will lead us through an exercise that we've designed to explore issues related to emerging technologies, climate change, and the exciting developments that Urbanism Next thinks about, and we've all gathered to talk about over the course of the next few days. And we want to explore those within the context of their impacts on prototypical commercial corridors. And we're proposing to do that today through the lens of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So we're going to share with you about Baton Rouge, Louisiana today, a little bit about our background and how we came together, and lead you through an exercise that we'll participate in through small groups to help us explore these issues more in depth and get some of your feedback and input and expertise around ideas for the future. I'm going to share my screen for our presentation. And I hope you can see here the title slide and the picture of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, our subject today that we will be exploring. Our work today is pretty straightforward. We're going to spend some time up top introducing you to our team and Baton Rouge and the Florida Boulevard corridor that is the subject of our study. And then we're going to have 3 breakout groups where we have assignments for you. You'll kind of be consultants to the city, thinking about a range of issues that we'll reveal as we discuss further and their future impacts. We'll kind of do some future scenario planning. So we all have our crystal balls today, and we'll be looking into the future to think about some future impacts and developments and responses that we can fashion to address changes in Baton Rouge, but that have implications much broader for cities across the nation and globe. So again, our goals today: understand the future impact of concurrent developments in automation, emerging technologies, urban mobility, climate change, and social inequality through an exploration of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and particularly this Florida Boulevard corridor. I want to start by introducing the team. We came together 2 years ago, actually, at the Urbanism Next conference. And I'm going to allow John Snow and Gavin Miller to introduce themselves. But in 2019 at the Urbanism Next conference, John Snow and I gave a presentation on mid-sized cities and the impacts of automation and new technologies on planning for those cities. We met Gavin there, and the 3 of us kind of joined up. Gavin and his team had the ability to actually visit Baton Rouge later in 2019. And so he's going to tell you about his work. I want to introduce myself. I'm Tyson, President and CEO of Build Baton Rouge. We are the redevelopment authority for the city of Baton Rouge and the parish. For those of you unfamiliar, in Louisiana, our counties are parishes. But I run our redevelopment organization. I'm responsible for coordinated land development, blight elimination, and long-range planning for the city and parish of Baton Rouge. And so I'm going to allow my partners, starting with John Snow of Emergent Method, to introduce themselves as well.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everybody. John Snow with Emergent Method. I'm a principal partner here at Emergent Method. We're a management and strategy consulting firm, also based in Baton Rouge. We do a lot of work in Louisiana, but around the country as well, in about 6 or 7 other states. Really kind of runs the gamut from strategic planning and communications to technology services and service and experience design. My work in particular is focused a lot in the public sector, particularly in working with municipalities, cities, parishes, counties, and local and state governments on everything ranging from planning to technology to digital transformation and everything that may entail. I also serve as chair of our Smart City Committee here in Baton Rouge that was established by our Metro Council and Mayor's Office several years ago to help guide and advise how our community evolve with respect to smart city topics and planning. And through that work, we've been able to work with a number of on a number of initiatives designed to help Baton Rouge think through topics and ideas and concepts that may not be here yet, but are rapidly evolving for our local community.
Great, and we'll move on to Gavin of MICA.
Thanks, Chris and John. Yeah, my name is Gavin Miller, Director at MICA Architects. And we're an architectural practice that do urban design and a whole range of not just architecture, but strategic planning for cities. We are based in London, but we have an affiliation with the University of Oregon, where we offer scholarships for internships to study in London. And I met, as Chris outlined, met Chris and John at the Urbanism Next conference. And we were particularly interested and very inspired by what Chris and John presented, and showed them our work. We've done a lot of strategic planning for London and looking at how cities tune and respond to opportunities and threats, if you like. And we've got a sort of track record of working with strategic urban authorities to visualize and test various scenarios. The scenario you see here is a scenario of Heathrow Airport as a city and no longer as an airport. But the point being, we work internationally looking at different kind of urban patterns and kind of track them. I'll hand you back to Chris, who's now going to give us more background to Baton Rouge.
Great, thank you, Gavin and John. As you see, we kind of combined a number of experiences across the Atlantic, and really excited about these various perspectives and how they can inform our approach to not just Baton Rouge, but cities everywhere. But I want to introduce you to Baton Rouge. We are the capital city of Louisiana, situated on the Mississippi River, about 90 miles northeast of New Orleans. We are a university town, a petrochemical hub, a mid-sized metropolitan area of about 800,000 in population. And as I mentioned, an economy that is largely petrochemical, governmental, and institutional, a land use environment that is largely suburban, with a lot of 20th century development, automobile oriented. We have a lot of segregation socially, and we struggle with that, as we will talk about in our discussion today. There is evolving infrastructure. We certainly are making advancements in smart city development, and we have a number of developments on the horizon, which really will have a big impact on this community. The red stick, as we call it, Baton Rouge is red stick in French, settled by the French where they found the Native American communities here and established a red stick on the bluffs of the Mississippi. And that's how the region got its name. You can kind of see here an outline of East Baton Rouge Parish, the home county, if you will, for the metropolitan region. And you can kind of see the urbanized areas, how the river dominates, and the various development dynamics of the region. The Florida Boulevard corridor is our focus. When we think about a prototypical urban corridor, we look to Florida Boulevard as an auto-oriented kind of relic of mid-century urban development in the United States. We all know in various communities, corridors that emerged in the middle part of the century when automobiles dominated, and ferrying people from downtown to the suburbs was the primary kind of organizing principle for urban design. These corridors were also dominated by large box development with big shopping centers, usually low density, parking oriented, and that is very much the case for Baton Rouge's development along this important corridor, which you see kind of highlighted on your screen here. And we know that as cities continue to grow and sprawl out, many of these corridors suffered as development and wealth moved to other places. Many of those large box developments, be they office centers or large retail centers or malls, begin to fall into decline, and that left blight and decay. That is certainly the case on Florida Boulevard. It connects downtown Baton Rouge to the west with the suburbs to the east. It is a dividing line for our city racially. And indeed, much of our racial segregation and social issues are kind of marked by this demarcation line. So again, we thought it was a great context to think about these various urban challenges and how they play out in these prototypical urban corridors. I should mention, as you see, that the corridor is home to one of the region's largest hospitals, which was shuttered, creating a healthcare desert, if you will. It recently reopened its emergency room, which was greeted by many community leaders and activists after years of working towards that, and that reopening coming in the urgency of the coronavirus pandemic. It is also home to our community college and the region's first modern mall, which has been shuttered for a number of years, which is now going to be the site of a 2.9 million square foot Amazon fulfillment center. So again, lots of change going on in this corridor that kind of harkens to challenges other communities are facing. I mentioned Amazon. This was not the HQ2 search, if you recall that, of a few years ago, but Baton Rouge has announced that a almost 3 million square foot fulfillment center for Amazon, multi-story, and you see Amazon's designs here, will replace the shuttered mall. When the mall opened at the corner of intersection of Airline Highway and Florida Boulevard, our subject corridor, when that opened in 1976, it was one of the largest malls in the nation. It has since fallen into decline as population and energy has moved in other places. Amazon replacing this site is a huge redevelopment opportunity for the city. But as we think about the coming technological innovations that companies like Amazon are bringing to cities, we can see down the road some of the opportunities and potential challenges that Baton Rouge may have to face. As I mentioned, our employment is tied to the petrochemical sector, the institutional sector. You see here a picture of Exxon's oil refinery. The 6th largest oil refinery in the nation, 12th largest in the world, is located right north of downtown Baton Rouge. It has been there for over 100 years. LSU on the right, excuse me, for those of you familiar with SEC football, in Death Valley, as we call Tiger Stadium, is also a big impact for our employment and our community and culture here in Louisiana. I just shared with you the mall that has died, as many malls around the country have died, to be replaced by an Amazon fulfillment center. You can see here the sheer land mass that is being contemplated or is going to be the new Amazon site, and it's tied to the region. And think about some of the land use implications and employment implications that this provides. This is a snapshot of the Florida Boulevard corridor with the community college in the distance, a model created by Gavin and his team. And I also want to give you some other images of the corridor just to give you a feel of what we're talking about. As you can see, there is a mix of blight. There is a lot of cars, right? It operates as a highway in many ways as it cuts through from the downtown and the river all the way through to the suburbs. The land use, as you can see, is predominantly low density residential in the environs, with commercial and office along the corridor, institutional development as well. And you see from the map here that there's residential all around. And so there are impacts for how people live and work and shop along this central corridor. Additional images of the Florida Boulevard corridor with the mall and the community college, you'll see, again, auto domination. We have a large right-of-way here. And so as planners look to the future, how does that right-of-way get repurposed to address issues like climate change mitigation or multimodal transportation, autonomous vehicle adaptation? All of those are issues that we're thinking about with this kind of prototypical urban corridor. Today, we want to explore a number of themes that we think animate a lot of the challenges that will be faced. They include land use, emerging technology, urban mobility, climate change, and social inequality. As we move forward with understanding the context of Baton Rouge and the Florida corridor, and the work that we will invite you to participate in the groups, we will be thinking primarily about these 5 issue areas: land use, emerging technology, urban mobility, climate change, and social inequality. I want to briefly run through these just to talk about existing conditions. With land use, in this environment, we have pervasive low density, suburban sprawl, and a very parking-centric approach to new development. As you see, we have significant tree cover in Baton Rouge. We're one of the greenest cities in the country, but we also have hazards with the environment, with the swampland that is at risk of being lost, and the risk that poses to our ability to withstand hurricanes and other devastating storms that South Louisiana is known for. Here we have a picture of the vacancy that we have currently. You'll notice the biggest spot is the former mall, so that will be taken care of, but significant vacancy on the northern side of Florida Boulevard, which is predominantly Black and predominantly low income. Less vacancy on the southern side. So again, hearkening back to how land use ties into social inequality. Here's another image, a rendering of kind of the land use dynamics of the region. Emerging technology. Baton Rouge has done a lot to advance itself with regards to open data, data sharing, public-private partnerships, and capital improvements, but a lot remains to be done. And indeed, like many cities, Baton Rouge is facing a future of adapting to the smart city frameworks that we've seen predominate other cities around the country. There's some of that is here as we think about complete streets and smart city and bike share, but we also have had talks about how to handle driverless trucks. We have a lot of freight traffic given our position on the Mississippi River and the connection to New Orleans and the Port of New Orleans and the Port of Baton Rouge and other national markets. We have a lot of progress on open source data. We're very proud of that. And we work to create an environment of experimentation with regards to infrastructure. We actually are in the process of syncing all of the traffic lights in the city so that that technological advancement will inure to the benefit of traffic. And again, some of our smart city adaptations are featured here. But we also know that Amazon will bring a number of possibilities to the city. And with 3 million square feet of warehouse and logistics space, we know Amazon has made a big investment in the region. But they've made other investments as well. As we think about the urban air mobility market and its relationship to emerging technologies, the prospect of drone delivery, and its relation to these large fulfillment centers that Amazon is building in Baton Rouge and around the country, creates a lot of possibilities. We've seen the projections here about the urban air mobility market set to reach $1 billion in value by 2030. What impacts will that have for city planning? Amazon has patented a number of ideas that relate to their design and intention for their fulfillment centers. Will Baton Rouge become a laboratory for some of these advancements? Urban mobility, we talk about. We told you about bus rapid transit that is coming to Baton Rouge, but we know that bike share, autonomous vehicles, and its relationship to transit-oriented development will also be important. Baton Rouge is one of the most congested cities of its size in the country. Its traffic issues are renowned as crossing the Mississippi River on I-10, which stretches from Los Angeles to Jacksonville, Florida, narrows to 2 lanes when coming through Baton Rouge, and that snarls traffic and impacts interstate commerce. We've talked about the car domination and the work that many have done to advance multimodal transit, but the preference for car travel remains in a city like Baton Rouge, as it does many places. There's talk about high-speed rail to New Orleans as being an essential economic development driver, but also something necessary for hurricane evacuation as we expect more frequent and more ferocious storms. And I mentioned bus rapid transit and the coming developments in bus rapid transit, another innovation that we're seeing cities around the country and the globe adopt to introduce multimodal options. I know as those of you who may be familiar with Urbanism Next and attended previous meetings and conferences, you're familiar with automation and all of the speculation around when will it come and in what form. And so we just wanted to refresh our memory about the different levels of automation. We'll have an opportunity to discuss that as we think about the next 15 years of planning in the small groups that we'll invite you to. Climate change. Baton Rouge is on the front lines of climate change in the country as Louisiana faces record coastal erosion, as the New Orleans region, which we know after Katrina, moved to Baton Rouge in those months afterwards, swelling, doubling the size of our city and presenting all types of challenges. We know that a number of infrastructure projects are underway to address this flood defense and other water mitigation efforts. But hurricanes are not our only risk. In 2016, Baton Rouge experienced a flooding event which had a $10 billion damage impact and led to a number of deaths. It was a 1 in 500 year event, but we expect that similar events will happen much more frequently and pose problems for planners and for how we live in the city. Approximately 250,000 people almost live within a flood zone in Baton Rouge. As we think about settling and land use and resettlement, how does a city plan for this type of exposure to water risk? I mentioned coastal resettlement. Climate change could impact 2 million people. And you see here the areas, virtually all of the areas south of Baton Rouge, including the city and the metropolitan area of New Orleans, are in this path of impact. And so as we think about Baton Rouge's planning, we think about what do receiving communities have to do as they confront the challenges of climate change. And there's more here on flood mitigation. We have a major infrastructure project, a $55 million diversion canal from one of our waterways to the Mississippi. We expect other infrastructure projects like that to be on the horizon. And finally, social inequality. Baton Rouge is marked by significant racial and spatial stratification. We have a demarcation in the Florida Boulevard corridor between rich and poor and black and white that not only undermines the bonds of civic and community connection in Baton Rouge, but also leads to a number of inequalities that, if exacerbated, have a detrimental impact on economic development and quality of life throughout the region. Some of these images you may be familiar of. In 2016, the Alton Sterling killing and related police officer shootings led to protests by Black Lives Matter and other groups that captured national attention. The BBC dubbed one of our North Baton Rouge neighborhoods as one of the most dangerous in the nation. Recently, there has been a movement to establish a breakaway city in the more prosperous area of southern Baton Rouge, leading to a number of conflicts that are still being debated and addressed here in the city. And so, again, some additional statistics on the racial and class dynamics in the community. But I hope you're getting the picture of the types of conflicts that we have across the various issue areas that we've identified, and their relationship to the challenges that many cities around the nation and indeed the globe are confronting as we step into this future. At this moment, as we're about 30 minutes in, I want to switch to the next segment of our presentation today. We are inviting you to participate with us in a number of 3 small groups, which have been pre-assigned, and you will briefly be invited to join. And in these groups, we're going to ask that you act as consultant groups to the city. And what we're going to do, we're going to do 3 of these, and we're going to do them for the next 5 years. And so we're going to look at 2021 to 2026 recommendations along the 5 issue areas. We'll then come back and share what we've done in our small groups. And then we will go again and look at 2026 to 2031. Another set of 5-year recommendations, and then 2031 to 2036. Along the way, we'll provide you some prognostications for what might happen that will impact the solutions that you explore in your small groups and ultimately use as a basis for your recommendations. So without any further ado, I want us to get started. Your assignment 1 is that you are advising the mayor to address the issues of land use, emerging technologies, urban mobility, climate change, and social inequality for the next 5 years of this community. With the Amazon facility, bus rapid transit coming, medical healthcare restored to a disinvested neighborhood, and the social inequality issues, what are the recommendations that you would give to the mayor to look down the road 5 years and think about how to plan to address these issues? So with that, you'll be invited to join the small groups, and we look forward to sharing with you then. We'll come back in 20 minutes and reconvene and report out and also prepare for the next exercise. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Kind of like Star Trek when you beam down and you beam back. You want to make sure everybody made it. I hope that your discussion in the groups was fun. I know in the group that I was in, we had a really good discussion, and as we previewed for you, we will be mixing it up a little bit in a few minutes with some other dynamics that we want to introduce for your consideration. This will be us kind of playing futurist here and making some predictions or prognostications, but all of that is just to help flesh out this exercise of how to deal with prototypical corridor planning and its impacts as we face these new technologies and dynamics. I'm going to share screen again. Just to put the presentation back up. We want to first just allow for some reporting out I don't know if there's anyone, including our discussion leads, that want to talk about the work in the groups. I won't start, but with our group, but I'll let Gavin or John. Did you want to report out, or was there someone else in your group who was going to report out?
Gavin here. I mean, I can start. Maybe Paul.
I'll get off a screen share, Gavin, and if you want to share your
well, Paul, do you want to share the board? Yeah, we had a really helpful and informative session, and it was really great to hear people's thoughts. And I think it kind of obviously it was in the context of first policies or first ideas with the BRT coming. I think obviously there was concerns about the number of stops on it and the importance that to create really vibrant nodes around these stops, and how many the stops there were to each block. In parallel, to work with readjusting the sidewalk condition, if at all possible, to make it more human. Small steps to the edges of the street. And doing that with people with perhaps landscape and so on, to begin to encourage the redefinition of the plots so that the car parking might go more to the rear, to create policies which may allow that or facilitate that, to encourage a greater mix of building use and vibrancy. So perhaps mixed use sort of residential and commercial, as opposed to it being a sort of frontline plot with residential behind. Other kind of things to emphasize, to encourage people to switch their behavioral trends to BRT, encouraging park and ride facilities, so that you're really seeing the real benefits of using BRT. Similarly, that's getting more people living in nodes near there to encourage them to use public transport more. Slow down the speed of the street if possible, with reducing speeds with pedestrian priority crossings. What else? Please, someone else. Anyone else from our group?
I will just add one of the things that we talked about related to the Amazon Fulfillment Center is, my name is Denver Igarda, and I am the Complete Streets Manager at the City of Portland, and we're going through a freight plan update right now. And one of the things that we're trying to wrestle with is both providing for freight access, truck access, and mobility, while at the same time ensuring that employees that we're trying to encourage to use different modes to get there feel safe. In this case, it would be taking BRT to get there. So they need to be able to have that kind of pedestrian safety to actually be incentivized to use BRT or their bike or whatever other way they can get around. So I think that was one of the points that we talked about.
So I think that was us, Chris. I think if anyone else has any more to add, but it was very helpful.
Yeah, well, that sounds great and interesting to think about the soon arrival of BRT and how that will impact this corridor and planning for transit in the very car-oriented environment going forward. Why don't we go next to my group, and then then John's group can go last. If we can, Neil, pull up our vision board. I keep saying vision board, it's jam board, but it feels like a vision board, right? Here's all of our thinking around this. And so I think one of the biggest themes that emerge is that in these first 5 years of thinking about this coming transit amenity, this big corporate investment by Amazon, and the land use dynamics of the corridor, that we needed strong community involvement. And so there was a lot of talk around making sure that there's quick action activities to spur community engagement, and that there's some kind of community-based prototyping and rapid implementation of projects that can kind of get really quality engagement from the community around what they want to see with all of these big possibilities kind of coming down the pike. So we also talked about affordable housing and anti-displacement, again, from the perspective of planning in these initial years, that we would have some ability to begin talking about the location of housing in close proximity to where this Amazon facility is going to be, given the potential 3,500 or more employees that will be working there. Amazon's commitment to a $15 minimum wage, which would create kind of workforce jobs, if you will, people that have some provision to afford housing and other needs. And so making sure that the design of the corridor kind of takes into account the future potential of housing demand and the opportunity to have people in close proximity to where they work. We also talked about the impact of drone technology and how to manage that for the city, as Amazon is indicated an interest in that. As we know, many logistics companies are examining drone delivery, and having this big fulfillment center and this vacant corridor, what kind of emerging technologies may be on the horizon that the city needs to think about. And lastly, again, we talked about social equity with this largely blue collar workforce, the supports that they may need, the reliance on public transportation and other public supports, how that might impact the city as well. So those are some of the highlights. Team, did I miss anything, or is there anything you think we should emphasize more? Okay.
I think you got it.
All right, good. So John, hand it to you.
Sure. Yeah. So, there was some overlap in discussions, and so I won't go exhaustively through ours, and certainly folks from our group chime in. But you see here our Jamboard with some of the key thoughts that were brought up. I'd say on the land use side, there was a lot of discussion around how planning around the park space and increased park space should be considered, and so where we can not only ensure that we have adequate sort of small mini ecologies to help capture water, but making sure that park space doesn't just directly surround the Amazon facility, and ensuring kind of more globally speaking, this kind of stretches into social inequality and a few other areas, making sure that the improvements that come with the Amazon facility are focused on making life better for those who are already here and not just those who are coming here in the context of just overall development. There were some good discussions around how we can convert extra spaces we have into detention centers. And so where there are parks and basketball courts and plazas with permeable surfaces that can be used really in a widespread manner with some pretty good planning. We talked on the emerging technology side around the need for EV infrastructure, and making sure that we're thinking through and anticipating where manufacturers are going with their focus on EV adoption and how those are being integrated into their supply chains, and making sure we've got the infrastructure for that. And then if we're trying to get more people to participate in public transit, the importance of giving people an experience around what good transit is, and so how we can do some experiential helping folks sort of understand what it's like to get out of their cars, and putting in place a campaign and or resources to help reinforce that message. We talked on sort of the urban mobility side of things around how bridges could potentially be an extension of sort of planning both for pedestrian and public transit. So where there are opportunities for bridges or corridors to focus on both will push people to use it more, knowing that there are multiple options for getting to where it is that they're trying to be. And really is kind of an attention grab and draw for folks. As you can see on this picture, it's just really a neat way to think about planning for mobility needs. On the climate change side of things, we talked about the importance of expressing to the mayor the need to collaborate with Indigenous groups in the area, making sure that their voices are heard as part of that progress, in leveraging their voice and ideas for how to tend to and manage the land outside of sort of the industrial space. And then identifying households that may have no cars and using that to spark how we think about transit-oriented hubs and making transit more accessible for all. And then lastly, on the social inequality side of things, we talked about making sure and constantly looking at how incoming or inbound technologies are potentially exacerbating social equity challenges. And so how we can get out ahead of and mitigate increases in cost of living that may come with rising technology use as well as rising economies. And we're not unintentionally pushing people to an area that may be under enhanced threat or risk of climate change or making them further disconnected in the process. Anybody from our group, did I miss anything?
That was pretty conclusive. I think we also talked about potential for water taxi and transportation in the city. But otherwise, that was great.
Great.
Yeah, that's really exciting and good stuff. Great. Well, I'm going to just quickly share my screen again, just to bring us back to our presentation. Our exercise continues. Gavin and his team have actually done some great modeling around the corridor as it evolves in the future. And Gavin, we have a few minutes before we move into our next session, but I just wanted to get you to comment on some of these. We have kind of the existing land use, and we talked about phases of development. And so what maybe a step one might look like.
Yeah, I mean, these are very much for people to react to. You can disagree with them or whatever, just to get you thinking. But what we're trying to do here is map what we understand to be the kind of 5 levels of where we are today towards full automation, which are sort of recognized stages for moving from humanly controlled vehicles to assisted to full automation. But what we're trying to do here is marry to see if there's opportunities in terms of a wider strategy. So as the city moves towards complete automation, what else can it do while it does it, and what other opportunities can it capture? So what you see here is the beginning of a kind of model which shows the gradual transformation of the street as more and more people ideally, hopefully, encourage ride sharing, be public transport or with automated vehicles, give more opportunity for the street to be more human with lower speeds, more landscaping, more bike lanes, and then on the plots, less car parking, ideally, therefore less tarmac, and then less and more permeable plots. So this is just a step, but this is where we think we are in the next 5 years with a centralized bus lane. Similarly, I know this is just the same principle zooming out, where there's a shopping mall on the right.
Yeah.
And similarly,
So
coming down, but this will build up as we go through.
Gavin, we see a lot of tree planting, and we know that that's not only a beautification tactic, but also a climate change mitigation tactic. This design, this vision obviously has the mall, as you see on the far right over here, but we know that will be repurposed. So let's move on. We appreciate you hanging with us. The exercise continues. And so you deliver those recommendations for the first 5 years. It's now 2026. You've been asked back. And some things have changed. The Amazon facility is built out and there are expansion plans. Drone operations will commence in the next few years from all major distribution centers for Amazon, including the one in Baton Rouge. The worker influx has increased the demand for affordable housing. We have seen an expansion in logistics and warehouse related businesses looking to be in Baton Rouge. They need large parcels for warehouse facilities. Additionally, BRT has increased demand for transit, but the city's tight budgets don't provide the local match for additional federal transit awards. 2025, another significant flooding event, severely impacting outlying suburban jurisdictions. So we've now got an increased demand for housing in the higher, older parts of the city. And those areas are experiencing changing racial and class demographics, particularly the city's historically Black neighborhoods. The oil and gas industry, which has long been an anchor for the economy, is wrestling with lower demand for oil and the explosion in electrification and alternative fuel adoption. Refinery production is down, and there are concerns that the refinery could close or significantly be reduced. So this is all facing the city in 2026 when you've come back, been asked back. And so we want to go back into our groups and think through, we've got a major climate event with the flooding again, and the impacts that's going to have on settlement in the region. A major legacy industry is experiencing continued shocks and may be in its decline, at least in how it operates in the city. A new industry is expanding, and there are all types of changes that are being wrought by that, including pressures on affordable housing, I'll put this back up, as well as other industries that want to be near that. So thinking again about this corridor, which you've been planning now to be multimodal, you've been planning to have community input to address the vacancy, to respond to Amazon's coming. Well, it's here now, and these are the challenges you faced. So with that, we want you to go back into the groups and think about this future scenario and how that changes any of your recommendations or raises new recommendations that you want to consider. So we'll go ahead and jump into our new groups, and we'll be there until for another 20 minutes. Again, I know we've had some people fall off. We had some people join us as well. So we just want to thank you all for hanging with us. I hope you're enjoying this exercise as much as we are. It's really exciting to kind of all be futurist, but think about these developments in a very real context, and with developments that are unfolding, that are impacting this particular city, but also I think have implications for urban development and governance around the country and the globe. So thanks for hanging with us. So again, let's kind of review what we did in our groups before we go into our last session. We are at, by my clock, I'm in Central Time, at about 12:51, and I know we're going to 12:30. So we have about less than 40 minutes to kind of do this report out and our final meet, and then a report out after that. So we're going to move a little faster. Gavin, I'll let you start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think Stephanie's going to start off.
Okay, great.
Oh, I guess I'm going. Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm a planner for the city of South San Francisco in California, so part of the Bay Area. So we talked about, first off, in regards to the automated vehicles, making sure that they were incorporated into the corridor as it's already existing, the road is already existing. So repurposing the corridor to incorporate the additional lanes for the automated vehicles, as opposed to, widening the corridor. Because what we're really trying to do is kind of hopefully activate that space and make it a little more usable and pedestrian friendly and more of a human scale. We also talked about potentially with the influx of residents and kind of seeing how the area is built out and a lack of, potential space to move out more, focusing on going up, so higher density, and offering a variety of housing that way, with the caveat of will people be willing to live in higher density residential units, possibly repurposing some of the land to incorporate more open space or parks to help with the flooding issue. A willing seller program was brought up about buying out properties, the city buying out properties from current owners to allow for relocation. But really, would the current residents want that? And with that, would they then choose to stay in the city in sort of a different, different higher density residential area, or would they, relocate to a completely different area out of preference for kind of the single family home and suburban life? Let's see, again, talking about more open space, parklands to soak up some of the flooding. Gavin, can you take over? I'm a little.
Yeah, no, or someone else. Yeah. We also talked about the issue with Exxon, and if Exxon ceased to be such a large employer in the city, to what extent new tech can plug that gap, while at the same time recognizing that new tech inherently moves towards less jobs the more. So there seems a kind of a mismatch there. And is there something else we need to identify potentially for employment? There was talk of manufacturing on the outer city area. And then, but obviously recognizing if such things as training programs and sort of getting people ready for new opportunities. And I think there was maybe a wider discussion of sort of recognizing that the kind of climate problem isn't going away, and what has to be clear what Baton Rouge offers to the kind of people that are going to be relocated. And as I understand, as our local Baton Rouge resident on our group confirmed, maybe they're not necessarily minded to move into a city centre, and they might be just moving north. And it's again how you address that. What else? Anyone else on my team, please jump in.
That's great, Gavin. We can, if that's all from your group, we'll jump ahead just in the interest of time, and we'll put up ours, Neil, if you want to share your. And these jam boards look great. I need to learn this technology. Look at how cool ours is. Okay, so shout out to Neil, doing great work. So we had a really far-ranging conversation. Barbara, I'm gonna start with your insight because I think it was really helpful. Barbara did what we all want to do. She invoked the Jetsons because that's what futurists do. But it was really insightful. We talked about the flooding event, kind of really heightening concerns around living with water and maybe being a tipping point for different types of development, particularly homes built on raised piers as opposed to slab on grade, and that this would be more amenable because the urban air mobility market will be growing and will be something that people are much more accustomed to, with drone delivery, packages moving around by flying drones or robots that move on the ground but can deal with water better than humans, that this may kind of create a convergence in technological abilities and changes in different land use attitudes around how we want to live that will kind of have us living on raised buildings that are accessible in part by flying drones delivering packages. And even if that's not fully here by 2026, if we have a flooding event and we have other dynamics, Amazon rooted in the community at this point, and maybe debuting drone technology out of its 3 million square foot and maybe larger facility, that may kind of change attitudes or create this kind of environment of experimentation that we wanted to talk about. So we know that we talked about the challenges of funding mass transit with a constrained capacity at the local government level. We also wanted to be honest that even if we had full automation today, we've got a fleet of cars that'll be with us for at least the next 20 years. And knowing that we'll still be very car dependent by 2026 and in the latter part of this decade. So we don't know what this political support will be for funding mass transit if the funds are tight. We talked about bikeway networks, mobility hubs, bike share. We talked about displacement and affordable housing policy, particularly if a major flooding event in the suburban areas kind of prompts a shift in location in the metropolis. And these kind of dynamics of climate gentrification, as we've talked about, could lead to displacement as people who were used to living in one place seek housing that may be higher and drier, but maybe minority communities and maybe others that would be at risk of displacement. So those are some of the things. And obviously we talked about the fossil fuel power potential decline and what that impact would have on the economy and the community. So I'll stop there.
Great, and I'll do a very quick run through of our group's discussion as he shares our jam board. A handful of things that I think reinforce and extend some of the comments that were shared by the other groups. We talked about the importance of incentivizing training and reskilling programs and getting folks the training and skills they need to participate in a new economy that is less petrochemical dominated, in tandem with really working hard to recruit new businesses, especially in sort of the transportation space, EV and AV companies, creating policies and programs for mentorship and youth programs that are uplifting the community at a younger age in this new economy and sort of new approach to mobility. We talked about using, as unfortunate as this disaster, this hypothetical disaster is, but using the disaster to the advantage of community sustainability and using it in a way to drive land use changes and overcome some very difficult political discussions in ways that make sure that, if and when this happens again, that we've implemented the appropriate policies and decisions that help to mitigate future impacts. We did talk a lot about having an emphasis on affordable housing and rent control measures, and Chris just kind of alluded to some of those same concepts. I think a broad theme of what we talked about was this concept of leaning into water as part of our natural environment as opposed to fighting against it, and using that mindset to look into water-based forms of transportation, looking at emergency water services. So we have a fleet of equipment and vehicles and channels that help prepare us not just for the disaster, but also provide different routes and ways to get around town, whether that's this concept of ephemeral rivers or underground tunnels, underground things that can help to both store water as well as be really important routes for moving around during a disaster, but ideally even beyond that. We talked a lot about bike connectivity. In not looking at drone technology as the only mechanism for deliveries and connectivity. And so, how we can facilitate and grow how we do bike deliveries and really emphasize, what we do with respect to bike bike transportation. There was a comment that was made around doing mock events, which is something that's done in one of our participants communities around like how you load up a bike and how you navigate through and out of the city in the event of a disaster. And so just helping people think through how to get out in areas that also show them what's possible for connectivity throughout the community. And then on the drone side of things, just, I think the word of drones kind of just operating with very limited policies governing them. I think the word used was cringy, and the impact that it can have, particularly in lower income areas. And so how you put in place and limit drone activity only to certain types of areas, and use bike transportation to complement how drones operate in some of these commercial or industrial areas, and then being really, really transparent so that folks know what data is being collected and what access drones have access to, even to what degree they're partnering with groups like local law enforcement. I think that the tendency for communities like a Baton Rouge or a mid-sized community is we want to be all in and aggressive about economic development, but we don't want to be thinking about 5 and 10 years down the road at what cost. And have we put ourselves in a position where we're extraordinarily reliant on one company or operator where they're dictating policy to the community as opposed to doing it in a collaborative manner. Anything I missed that was a big topic from our group? All right.
Okay, great. These are all great discussions. We really appreciate you all just digging into this exercise. I hope you're having fun as we kind of think through all of these possibilities. If I could have the screen back, we're getting into the last, kind of segment of this, and I want to make sure we have time for our last little group and report out in these last 30 minutes. So I'm going to quickly, I'm going to share my screen again and just bring us back to the presentation. As we did before, we had a few exhibits where we wanted to kind of discuss and kind of, graphically kind of think about what the impact of some of these things would be. Just looking at climate change, thinking about Baton Rouge with regards to coastal Louisiana, which is already undergoing resettlement as a receiving community. And so there's a question of where do people go, and how does those densities change the existing landscape and land use. Back to the corridor and thinking about the adaptations and design, as Gavin's team has kind of mocked up models of what that may look like. You saw those models in the last one. We continue this with additional steps. Gavin, here we talk about step 3 involving some of that flood mitigation.
Yes, and you see the opportunities to build more to the front to the street edge, to create a more sort of human environment, and gradually trying to repurpose existing traffic lanes for landscape, for drainage, for bikes, and for autonomous vehicles. So, and then reduction of parking lots, swapping tarmac for permeable water systems. And that's at a larger scale. So as Chris pointed out, I'm trying to green the city. The opportunity is there is an opportunity here to green the city, which obviously brings so many potential environmental benefits.
Absolutely. So, okay, so we are now at the last segment. So we're going to go back in our groups, and we're not going to spend a lot of time there. And maybe Tristan, if we can, let's hold up Tristan real quick. I just want to go through it real quick. But if we can set the next segment to 15 minutes as opposed to 20, we'll be good. So it's 2031. You've been asked back because you do such amazing work. And everyone, you're so spot on. You've been asked back. And since the last time, even more has changed. By 2031, the emergence of robotics in warehousing and logistics has impacted not only the Amazon facility, but the other logistics-based companies that have sprung up. That has impacted the human workforce and their impacts to come. while we had changes adopted after the 2025 flood, we still have competition for housing as the region reshuffles. Buyout programs and housing impacts have led to this climate gentrification, as we suspected it might, as many of you suspected it might in the, after the 2025 event. There has been a resettling of Louisiana's Gulf Coast. And in 2029, the New Orleans region experienced another Katrina scale hurricane event. Unlike the last time, there's a different conversation about coastal resettlement and coastal development. And so Baton Rouge's population has swelled in size yet again, but the prospects are different for whether or not people will return to those vulnerable areas. And so level 3 automation has been introduced, and that's slowly being felt in the region as we start planning for a mixed future of autonomous and human-manned vehicles. All of this is impacting this commercial corridor that we've been thinking about with now a rise in robotics, a Katrina-like event, not only causing the resettlement that the flooding that we projected in 2025 could produce, but now you've got an entire metropolitan region either coming to this receiving community of Baton Rouge as they did before, or leaving the state entirely. Level 3 automation is hitting the streets. So our drones are not only in the sky, but they're actually on the roads. So with that, we want to think about this last set of recommendations. We're going to go into our groups. We'll only be there for 15 minutes, and we'll come back. Tristan, maybe we should time it for like 12 minutes, actually, just to keep it tight so we don't run over. Okay, see you guys. Okay, we are beamed back from our small groups. Let me just say, I know this is, this exercise has been a bit of a marathon. Everybody's gonna need a nap and lunch after this. But we hope you've enjoyed it and it's been helpful in kind of, number one, kicking off this conference. And we are just so thankful to Urbanism Next for allowing us to be part of the kickoff for what we know is just going to be an exciting conference that I'm looking forward to, and I know you are as well. But also just, kind of thinking about these issues. Since the last time that Urbanism Next convened, the world has changed. And it's always changing, right? It's a little meaningless statement, but we've had a big change, and are thinking about the future of our life in cities is evolving as well. So this exercise has just given us an opportunity to look in this particular context down the road in our crystal balls and think of what might happen. So our last assignment, right? A Katrina-like event, once again, resettling a major community in South Louisiana and globally, New Orleans, having to potentially retreat, and what the implications are on Baton Rouge. The last time the city doubled in size. This Amazon facility, as quickly as these 3,500 jobs that are set to come in the next 2 years, we know in another decade, robotics could replace a lot of them. What impact will that have? And level 3 automation. I mean, again, we'll be with our, human-man automobiles for at least the next few decades in the most optimistic and aggressive scenarios. But when it finally happens, when the cars are finally driving themselves, which many people think will happen in the next 10 years, what does that mean? So we want to report out a little quicker than we did last time. We've only got a few minutes left in our session, but I'll let Gavin, you go first, as you did last time. You're on mute, Gavin.
Apologies. Yes, we focused, Denver and our group spoke about, irrespective of automation and climate change and all these key, obviously very pressing issues over and above. It's just really important to think of cities as planning for people and to have a people-centric approach, which runs through kind of well-being, training, and education, and just sort of receptiveness of the city to accommodate quality of living. Stephanie had a focus on if we were able to have achieved this kind of intensification and this new kind of repositioning of the city or the boulevard, or the lands around the boulevard, which might involve new mixes and new types of development approaches. How do we get the private sector to invest? How do we get their mindset on board to make it all work financially? And then Crimsey, our Baton Rouge resident, spoke about the kind of readiness of the people to be able to, of the city to be on board with this, and to what extent, and receptive to this, and how that that's absolutely a key journey in how we prepare people for it, because people in some ways are minded to be resistant to new things or people telling them what they can and can't do. So there's a sort of wider outreach issue on that. I think that's the gist of it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'll go next for our group 2, as Neil gets it up. We were just having a really good discussion when it ended about just the implications of what a major resettlement could be, both for the community being moved and the community receiving, and how that is coming, unlike in 2005, amidst the new world of work where people are more used to being home-based, and where we have various populations kind of intermixing. So we talked about the role that community land trusts could play in stewarding land in a way that allows for kind of more community-driven planning and response efforts to that kind of a major resettlement. The fear being that if it's just all kind of left to the market, then there'll be competition, there'll be housing inflation, there'll be all types of inequalities that result. But if there are community land trusts which have community stewardship and governance of property, then this is a way to ensure that everybody is accounted for in whatever response efforts kind of happen after that major event. We also talked about, as I mentioned, the home-based workplaces. We continued our discussion of climate gentrification and our concern around that, and just the impact of what a post-Katrina landscape would be for the Baton Rouge and New Orleans region. So I'll stop there. We can go to John.
And
I should have asked my team if there was anything else I missed, but I think we're probably okay. Okay,
I'd say depending on where you are in the world, stomachs are probably growling, whether it's an early late lunch or an early dinner. So I'll be really quick. I think that one of the things, Chris, you touched on it, that was one of the more, I think, poignant components of our discussion was this idea of having a proactive posture around community relocation, as opposed to responding to it in real time, and how we can proactively both position Baton Rouge as a receiving community, but also use it as a mechanism to get people, local folks who have been longtime residents, on board with this idea of new people are going to come into our community, and it may be by the tens of thousands, and not seeing them as a threat or they're taking up valuable space, and more just making sure that we are designing both our spaces as well as our mindsets around incorporating folks into the community, as opposed to just being very reactive in challenging our minds as well as our infrastructure to accommodate sort of an influx of folks. And I think that was a big chunk of our conversation. I thought it was very well said by the folks in our group, and a lot of the rest of the conversations echoed what you and Gavin just kind of went through.
Great. All right. Well, as John mentioned, I'm sure the loudest thing in your ear right now is the sound of your stomachs growling for lunch. So we don't want to hold you much more. We just want to wrap up here. On behalf of Build Baton Rouge, Emergent Method, and MICA Architects, we want to thank you for taking this journey with us, doing this exercise, and kicking off the Urbanism Next conference, which I know we're all really excited about. Your input, your time has just been invaluable. We've enjoyed this. We hope you've enjoyed it as well. And we appreciate you letting us share the work that we do, the place that we call home, and the ideas that really excite us in this session today. I want to especially thank the team at MICA Architects. You've had Neil McWilliams, Hazik Arifin, and Paul Wynn on kind of driving this. And I think the Jamboard management has been amazing. Gavin, you have an incredible team. They came to Baton Rouge after we met at Urbanism Next in 2019. So we again just thank Urbanism Next for the opportunity for us to be connected. But Gavin, the visualizations, they put the deck together, all the images you've seen, they did all of that work. And so just want to especially shout out MICA Architects and their incredibly talented and dedicated and visionary team for putting this together. We want to thank Urbanism Next for giving us this opportunity to participate in this convening. We enjoy it. I'm sure we will have future proposals that we'll do. And so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to present again. And then lastly, I want to thank each and every one of you. Again, you guys are just amazing professionals, great ideas. We appreciate your engagement, and it's been good to spend some time with you, virtually at least, on this Wednesday. So we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. I also want to thank Tristan, who's here on behalf of Urbanism Next, kind of watching over everything and managing all of this. Thank you, Tristan and Urbanism Next, for allowing this, and enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference.